Welcome to the Burn Your Mortgage Podcast, a Canadian real estate podcast that shows you how to pay off your mortgage sooner and live well while doing it. Now, here's your host, Sean Cooper.
Welcome to the Burn Your Mortgage Podcast. I'm Sean Cooper, and it's great to be back for another episode. On today's show, I'll be talking to Lionel Romain. Lionel Romain is based in Toronto, where he has worked with Kijiji Real Estate for over a decade, helping connect landlords and tenants across Canada. In my interview with Lionel, we discuss what is the Kijiji Canadian Rental Report and why does it exist, insights in the report that could help landlords, and what are potential renters looking for right now. Without further ado, here's my interview with Lionel Romain. Hi Lionel, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Sean. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to speak with you. You're the first childhood friend that I've ever had on the podcast here, and it's great that we found a topic that we could share together, your employment at Kijiji there. So yes, super excited to talk about a very interesting report you have for renters who are aspiring homeowners, as well as it has some great insight for landlords. So yes, really looking forward to sharing that with the listeners today.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to reconnect on something so many years later after initially meeting, playing in the sandbox when we were little kids. So I'm looking forward to the conversation as well.
Yeah, who would have thought we'd be doing a podcast together one day?
Stranger things have happened.
That's true.
Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, let's jump into things here. So yeah, I had a look at the report and definitely some very interesting insight. Encourage the listeners to check it out. We'll include a link in the show notes here. But yes, maybe you could just tell the listeners a bit about the report. So yeah, what is this report, this wonderful report that we're talking about, and why does it exist?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the question. So yeah, the report we're talking about is the Kijiji Rental Report. We kicked off an iteration of the Kijiji Rental Report in 2023, and it's been getting some pretty good traction through media outlets and as well as on social from kind of both the renters and kind of landlord segments, as well as the just people generally interested in the real estate market. So we've been continuing to produce this report throughout 2023. We did kind of a year in review that we launched in Q1. And the most recent version of this is based on the first 3 months of 2024. So we're looking at all of the rental data that we have on Kijiji from that period. In some cases, we are kind of comparing it to the same period in 2023. Sometimes we're comparing it kind of a year over year view, or maybe just chopping things up and looking at a particular segment of interesting data. So yeah, like as Kijiji's most visited rental place, we have so many data points that we can use to build these interesting stories and just really generate some insights that can hopefully help Canadians maybe save a few bucks or learn a few things about the rental journey, or kind of about how to better market or rent their rental properties to renters.
Yeah, sounds great. I mean, being a landlord myself, I wish a report like that existed back then, because if you just put out a rental report and you have no clue what tenants are looking for, you may not attract the right of tenants. But yes, the more data that you have at your fingertips, the better that you can write a rental listing, and it saves time for both parties. It saves time for the landlord as well as the renter, so that you're both not looking at properties that aren't not well suited for either party. So yeah, I'll be sure to include a link to the rental report for everyone to check it out, and highly recommend that you check it out there. But yeah, we'll be diving into this report because I understand that you have a lot of interesting insights to the report here. So following up on that there, can you share some of the insights in the report that would be interesting to the listeners and might help landlords looking to rent their property in the coming months here?
Yeah, of course. So one thing that was particularly interesting that we looked at in the report was not so much around kind of the rental prices, but around the experience of the renters and the landlords when they're either posting or replying to listings for rental apartments. So the time of day was one really interesting thing that we zoomed in on here. We were looking at a couple of different things. So first of all, we were looking at when are renters looking for apartments? Like obviously there's going to be people that are looking, early in the morning, all hours of the day, but really, when are the most people looking during the daytime? What's the range of when most renters are kind of interested in looking at and replying to apartments? And for landlords, that could be, particularly helpful. Maybe I want to strategize when I'm posting my rental listing, or even, potentially promoting my rental listing at a certain time of the day to kind of take advantage of these trends, of these insights. So the one thing that we noticed, like the biggest percentage of Canadians looking for rental listings are typically searching between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Now, that's a pretty broad window, but I think, when you think through it logically, that's the time when most people are kind of up and at it and really kind of looking for different things. They're shopping, they're working, they're doing all sorts of different things. They're not busy with kids and sleeping and all that kind of stuff. So
I guess we have some early risers there, 6 a.m. I mean, don't really like looking at stuff until I've had my morning cup of tea there, but I guess there are some early risers there that like to get to it the first thing. I mean, I guess you could just kind of check it out on your phone when you're first waking up there.
that's it. And I bet a lot of those people have even been to the gym before they start looking. So, you have those early morning risers. Not for me, but yeah, there's certainly a lot of people that get up early and start their days.
Yes, amen to that.
So a couple of other things. So like between 6 and 9, things really start to slow down, but we do see about 17% of the replies coming during that period. So kind of in that like kind of dinner before bedtime, we don't see as much interest, but I guess you're seeing a lot of people maybe sitting there on their phones during dinner, kind of looking around when they have a little bit of at least half free time when they're just eating. But the most surprising thing for me, I think, is that we saw 22% of replies for standard long-term rentals and 24% of replies in the roommates category that happened between 9 p.m. and 4 a.m. So that's quite a large percentage of the total replies that we see. And it really tells us that maybe there's a lot more kind of night owls out there than we previously had thought, which is really interesting, right? I wouldn't think to be looking for apartments at 10 p.m. at night or at midnight, but perhaps that's just my lifestyle. So I guess for an important lesson for landlords who are looking to engage with these people is, yeah, it might be a little bit different than what you think in terms of when people are looking around for apartments. So if you're looking for that kind of niche, if you're looking for that balance between kind of supply and demand, hey, maybe posting your ad around 9 p.m. might not be the worst idea, because you have far less competition for listings, fewer landlords are posting then, and then you're seeing a lot of people actually replying. So, maybe that could provide you a nice, a little advantage over the landlords that don't know that stuff.
That's great advice. And also, if you're going to be living at the property with the tenant, let's say you're renting out the basement of your primary residence, that can kind of be a clue if you're well suited for each other there. Because, yeah, if you're an early riser and the tenant is a night owl, it may not be the best fit there. So, yeah, I mean, of course, like when somebody messages you, it doesn't necessarily tell the whole story, but yeah, it could definitely give a clue for if you're well suited for each other. Because yeah, like if you're going to be living with the person, some people are quiet people, other people are social people and like to have a lot of guests over and stuff like that. And I find it's helpful when both the tenant and landlord, if they're living together, have a similar lifestyle there. So yeah, that can definitely give you clue into if you have a similar lifestyle and would be a good fit there. Because yeah, you don't want to be waking up early and waking up the tenant, and you don't want to be trying to go to bed early and then the tenant wants to stay up till midnight there. So yeah, definitely it's helpful to know some of that stuff in advance so that you're not getting on each other's nerves later on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting thing to look at, to consider that demographic of when that person is maybe initially engaging with you around that rental, to give you maybe a little bit of a sneak peek about their lifestyle. So, obviously maybe dig into that a little bit further, because, first impressions can be deceiving. But yeah, it's certainly a good indication of a potential fit right off the bat.
Yeah, I wouldn't screen them out solely based on that, but definitely
Yeah,
have that at the back of your line and maybe ask them a question or two about that.
absolutely.
But yeah, that's an interesting insight there. I'm sure you have do you have maybe one or two other interesting insights to share from the report?
Yeah, I think like just to follow up on the kind of time of day thing, I mentioned that landlords are posting fewer listings in the evening time, but I just wanted to also highlight again, for anyone that's listening, that's a landlord that's, experiencing maybe quite a bit of, competition in that space for trying to get that right tenant, for trying to get that perfect fit for their apartment. That we do notice that the afternoon between kind of 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. seems to be the hot time for posting and promoting rentals. So as a landlord, even if you're like we just discussed, maybe if looking for a tenant that's kind of active in the evening isn't maybe your cup of tea, another nice window to look at is that kind of morning time, at 6 a.m. to noon. And again, we're seeing about 27% of listings posted in that morning time. So if we're looking at, the number of people that are looking during that time versus the number of listings that are being posted at that time, that morning, 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. is probably another nice little sweet spot, similar to what I mentioned, that 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. later. So there's a couple of those little sweet spots where the demand kind of outstrips the supply that you might want to look at if you're trying to time things like that.
Wow, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that there. And yes, I guess with keeping that in mind, if you're going to be renting your own property and you're deciding versus using a realtor to help you with the property, and definitely the realtor can help you with listing the property on Kijiji there. But yeah, I guess you have to ask yourself, do I have the capacity to reply to these messages and reply to phone calls during the day during this peak time? Because if you have a pretty demanding full-time job, that may not be ideal for you. So maybe hiring a realtor might make sense in that case there. So yeah, definitely something to think about.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention about the report there? That's definitely been some helpful insight so far.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah. So there's some like really interesting things when you dig into the rental data and kind of maybe look at things from a little bit of a wider scope. Like one of the things that I was interested in when we were looking at this data was like, well, we know about renters and we know about, what they're doing with the rental listings and specifically, but what else are they doing? Like, we don't really know that renter in their kind of experience in their kind of rental journey as well as, maybe we would want to as landlord or as renters. So we looked at some data like slightly outside of the rental space. Like when a person is on Kijiji looking for a rental, kind of we asked the question, what else are they looking for? Like what else are they thinking about? So are they considering purchasing? What services are they looking at? Right. And that will give us a little bit more insight about the person and about that kind of rental journey that people are going through. So like one example, which is actually the number one most replied to category by people that are also looking for rentals is furniture. And that really makes a lot of sense. Like Kijiji's got categories. We've got furniture, we've got cars, we've got jobs, we've got all different services. You can buy a phone, all kinds of stuff. So you have the kind of opportunity to be on Kijiji, look a number of different things. And so what we find is that renters are looking for furniture. It makes a ton of sense, right? You're moving into a new rental and you obviously need to furnish that rental and you're probably staring down a pretty hefty monthly rental price. So one of the things that a lot of Canadians are doing is they're going on Kijiji at the same time, and they're also looking at furniture to help furnish their apartment once they find that new home. And I guess like for landlords, like that may be a particularly interesting insight into people wondering whether or not they should offer their unit as furnished or unfurnished. We know that a lot of people looking for rentals are looking to purchase that furniture. So it may be a nice way to attract that segment of people who are budget conscious and looking for maybe some of that secondhand furniture on Kijiji. Maybe they'd be amicable to a furnished unit and maybe even be a little more attractive to them.
That's some interesting insight there. Thanks for sharing that. Because, yeah, maybe some people might not have considered furnishing their unit, but yeah, it seems the report, it's definitely conclusive there that there are a lot of people looking for furnished places. So, yeah, definitely something to consider as a landlord if you're going to be renting out your property there. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of competition on both sides for the renters as well as the landlords. Like as a renter, you're competing against potential like tenants, other applicants, and as a landlord, you're competing against other landlords listing their property. It's kind of like buying and selling. Like when you sell your property, you're competing against other people selling their property there. So I'm just curious, like in terms of what renters are looking for besides furnished apartments, like do you have any other interesting insight and for somebody that's looking to list their property as a landlord in terms of what renters are looking for so that they can better position and their property so that they're getting the right type of tenants. Do you have any other interesting insights into that, Lionel?
Yeah, I think like what would be an interesting thing for landlords to kind of keep in mind is that a lot of, and again, related to this, kind of what else are renters looking at when they're looking for a rental, is they're looking at, and a lot of people know this already, but the data is showing us that a lot of people are also looking at homes for sale. So this same group that's looking for rental apartments is at least considering, the idea of purchasing a home, whether that, may be realistic in the near future or something down the road that they're just looking for a little bit of inspiration. I think landlords keeping that in mind that, oftentimes the ideal outcome for someone is owning their own home. So kind of anything that you can do with your rental to make it feel like an independent home for that renter versus the feeling of just living in someone else's space, I think can make a big difference. And there's ways that you can do that in terms of how maybe the rental is laid out, maybe some of the amenities that are offered, just maybe even some of the ways that you communicate the property to that tenant around like, hey, it's quiet, it's private, its own outdoor space. So really leaning on some of those things that people are interested in when they're weighing that option between, the ideal of maybe buying a home versus renting a home. Just think about some of those differences and maybe try and incorporate that into your rental and how you communicate that rental. And it may give you a better opportunity to attract, maybe that right kind of tenant that you're looking for.
No, that's great advice because, yeah, if you just write a rental listing as a landlord and you have no idea in terms of what the ideal tenant is, you're going to attract all sorts of different tenants, which you may not be well suited for each other. But if you have like a specific tenant in mind, you can really like target the listing towards that tenant. Like if you're looking for somebody that's looking for a backyard, you can mention the spacious backyard and mention, like you said, if you're looking for somebody who is looking for quiet, you could mention that it's in a quiet neighborhood there. So yeah, definitely giving some thought to that and having in mind the ideal tenant ahead of time before you write the rental listing, I find is very helpful. And hey, like there's literally thousands of rental listings on Kijiji, so why not like go on there and see, like when I'm renting my place, I always see like what is being rented in my area, and I don't copy it word for word, but I just see like how they advertise the property, and it kind of gives me some ideas in terms of how I could better write my listing there. So yeah, definitely don't steal from other people's listings, but just see how they're advertising their listings, and that may give you some helpful insight into how you can write your listing better to attract the right type of tenants so that you're well suited for each other and you're not wasting each other's time.
Yeah, and again, and pricing as well, right? Pricing is an important factor to make sure that your asking rent is kind of within the range of the affordability of the type of tenant that you're looking for. And these rental reports, landlords will find some insights, specifically down to even the number of bedrooms contained in that rental apartment to give them an idea of, what an average rent might look like. But like you said, even going a little bit deeper than just looking at a report into going onto the site and doing some searches that are similar to your property and finding out how other landlords are advertising their properties, what prices they're putting on them, whether they're including utilities in the cost or not. Learning all of those things before you get started and post that rental can really put you in an advantageous place to finding the right kind of tenant. So yeah, that's a great insight, Sean. Going to the site and just pretending that you're a renter looking for an apartment and just better understanding that journey before you get into it from the landlord side is definitely a great recommendation.
Yeah, I always do that myself there because price is so key. You don't want to price yourself too low and be leaving money on the table, but you don't want to be pricing yourself too high because what will happen is people will view your property and maybe they'll like the property and all that, but they're going to be seeing other properties in the area and they'll think, well, why is your property listed so much more? And the other properties are listed less and I can get the same amount or get even better amenities than your property there. So it's so important to just see what else is listed out there and just make sure your property is competitive, because you may have a very nice rental unit, but the same idea as when you're trying to sell your property, you may have a very nice property, but if you don't price it correctly, then it's just going to sit on the market forever. And you could have spent all this money renovating it and putting all this hard work into making the property look really nice. But if you don't price it correctly, then it's just going to sit there and it's going to be frustrating for both parties, because the tenants may like it, but the price won't make sense. And you're going to be frustrated as the landlord because you put all this hard work into the property and it's not renting and you're missing out on potential rent. So yeah, definitely it can save a lot of headaches for both parties if you just go on there, see what other properties are being listed for in terms of price and amenities, and you make sure that yours is competitive and you adjust it accordingly. So yeah, thanks so much for the helpful insight there.
Yeah, of course. It's kind of one of those, like, if you've got it, flaunt it kind of things. And like, that's one additional tip that I would just give to landlords, kind of piggybacking on what you said, is that make sure when you're posting on sites like Kijiji that you consider all of the different amenities that your apartment has or that your rental unit has. And if it does have those, make sure that it's well reflected in the listing itself, right? Whether that be one of the many kind of amenity attributes that we offer on listings on Kijiji, like you can identify whether you offer utilities or just some utilities, pets, no pets, outdoor space, whether there's a yard or a balcony. So making sure that you have all of those amenities that turn into data points on Kijiji that people are looking for. People are selecting those filters, choosing which amenities are most important to them. So by including those in your listing, you're making sure that you are putting your best forward to creating the best fit between the person that's initially replying to your listing and your rental unit itself. So I would say that for landlords, that's definitely a strong recommendation, is just to make sure that your listing reflects everything that you offer in that rental unit to make sure that initial engagement is with the right person.
Well, very well said. Well, thank you very much, Lionel, for being on the podcast today. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I appreciate you sharing all of this helpful insight in terms of the report there. And as mentioned, I will link to the report in the show notes, so be sure to check that out there. But yeah, thanks again for being on the podcast, and we'll be sure to do this again in the future here. So yeah, I appreciate your time and insight today. It was a very interesting conversation that we had.
Thanks, Sean. I'd be happy to come on again anytime. You just let me know. Thanks. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Burn Your Mortgage podcast. Besides being a podcast host, I'm also an independent mortgage broker. If you or anyone you know, family, friends, coworkers, or neighbors could ever use any unbiased mortgage advice or a second opinion, feel free to reach out. Email me at Sean, that's SEAN, at burnyourmortgage.ca, or call or text me at 647-867-3711 for a free mortgage consultation. Also, be sure to head on over to www.burnyourmortgage.ca and sign up for my free weekly newsletter. As a small token of my appreciation, you'll be able to download my ultimate mortgage checklist on choosing the perfect mortgage. I look forward to hearing from you and helping you with all your mortgage needs. Once again, thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Mortgage podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating. Until next time, happy mortgage burning.